this is the second conversation that we're having with the guys in the inner circle. And of course, you are one of those guys. And, you and I have known each other for a number of years now through work stuff, but then obviously have experienced different things in person and, retreats on a business level, but then also on a personal level, just have talked lots and shared books, and you sent me over bags of teas and we become friends, let's put it that way. And of course you and Mike have just kind of officially met really within the last couple of months. And we've all been on this journey together of showing up every single day and just committing to be a little bit better versions of ourselves. And our whole focus on this is really just to introduce all these guys, and you being one of them, of course. So I want to give you the floor a little bit here and just say, who is NIKO? Give us a little bit of a glimpse, including all of the animals that you have in your house.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll segue by, I'll lead actually with the menagerie and the why we have the equivalent of a animal sanctuary, but in a townhouse south of Montreal. So Toby and I met, my fiance Toby and I met, we're going on 15 years, I think, in August. So we met, she's originally from Philadelphia. She was traveling to Montreal to work in science in Montreal, and she also is a huge fan of music, house music in particular. And at that time, I was a managing partner at Stereo Nightclub, which has one of the best sound system in the world. She was a huge fan of that music scene, so she was traveling back and forth between Vermont and Montreal. We had friends in common, so we met back then and fell in love, started dating, and it's only over a few years later that this mutual passion for the furry friends and the four-legged friends started to unfold. And back in Montreal, we lived in a sort of a high-end condo just behind the Bell Center. It's called the Windsor Garden. But garden, it only has of garden the name because there's a huge inner yard, and it has a pretty uppity homeowner association associated with it. So you have a huge inner garden where you can't play with a ball and you can't bring your dog, and so we made fun of what was frowned upon within that scene. And at that point we had maybe a small dog, like a 20-pounder mutt, and 2 cats, but we were already fostering cats for the SPCA. We're a foster family, and we started to need, we needed to expand. The anecdote around how we ended up in a suburb, which I never thought I'd live in a suburb for the first 25 or 30 years of my life. I grew up in the countryside. I was a beach bum and a ski bum growing up, and we made fun of suburbanites because, that's not really urban and it's not really the country. So we thought it was it's what you don't know as a younger adult, right? So we thought that was so icky. And when we had a chance to move from downtown, but we wanted to stay relatively close to a lot of what's happening in Montreal, then I understood the purpose of a suburb. You can be sort of in the city, but not have to deal with craziness of downtown. So one Saturday afternoon, Toby asks me, it sounded something like, "Do you have rodeo in Quebec?" I was like, "I think so. I remember going as a kid, to one rodeo show." I said, "We must," but I had no clue how much of a scene it is here and how much horse ownership there is. So in her usual perky attitude and kind of go-getter, she picks up the phone, she picks the yellow pages, she finds out that the discipline she's looking for is referred to as gymkhana. She wants to do barrel racing, and she had a little bit of a background in horsemanship. So she finds one that looks interesting. She calls them up. She says, "Do you do barrel racing?" And the owner says, "Well, yeah." She goes, "Okay, I'm coming over," or something to that effect. And I don't even think she told him. She just said, "Great." She hangs up, jumps in her car, drives there, shows up, and she's like, "Okay, I'm here. Let's do barrel." They're like, "Do you have an appointment? Do you have a lesson scheduled?" I was like, "No, I'll wait." And she ended up waiting for, I don't know, an hour or two, hopped on a horse, met that owner of that facility. And long story short, she became like a second mother. She was like very, very close to us for the next 5 or 6 years of her life. She unfortunately went through cancer and lost that battle in the 5 or 6 or 7 years like following that. But that was the start of the adventure of Toby being involved in the rodeo scene in Quebec. And then I started going to those shows and realizing that there's like thousands of horse owners around here, and there's a big Western scene, and discovered the sport. And with that, she started to practice the sport regularly, ride 3, 4, 5 times a week. The commute from Montreal didn't make a ton of sense, so we moved on the South Shore, 10 minutes away from where that original facility was, and that's how we became suburbanites. And once we had a tiny spit of land here in the townhouse that we rent, we have maybe like half an acre or a little less. So now we could have a garden, and we could have more dogs and more cats, and a slew of creatures, from tarantulas, seahorses, reef tanks, saltwater tanks, snakes, name it. There's now rabbits. Chicken is one we haven't done yet because it's frowned upon in this municipality. But we've had quite the little farm, and now it's been a few years that we're looking to actually get a farm, so that this little menagerie could unfold in a little bit more spacious.
Spread its wings.
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible. So lots of animal loving happening, and so when do you guys spend your time with your animals? I mean,
it's so interestingly for me, that's sort of connected to my parents were huge nature lovers, and they had like a different take on it. They were fishermen and hunters, which I'm not. I'm like the most remote from a hunter in the family, in the sense that I make the choice, and I don't frown upon it. Like, I don't think there's a huge difference between killing a deer respectfully for your family, or eating beef that's been in a slaughterhouse, and that's sort of the take that my stepdad had on it. But it's just me personally being at the end of the bow or the rifle that takes down the animal, like that doesn't tickle me in a good way. So I'm not a hunter, but I was introduced to respect for nature and love for nature. So it was a little bit of a connection for me back to my parents and their love of animals. And for Toby it was similar. They grew up with all kinds of, no cats, but all kinds of dogs and horses in the family at different times. And we don't have kids yet. That's something that we've been trying actively. We've been intending to have kids for the last couple of years. It hasn't unfolded yet. So there's a bit of that giving. I remember someone in our group sharing that they decided to foster kids because they wanted to give. It's a little bit similar with us and animals, and we get a lot of joy from fostering because a city like Montreal will euthanize like 500,000 dogs and cats a year. So we usually take in a pregnant queen, so a mommy cat that's a little sick or needs some tender love and care. We nurse her back to health. We have the healthy litter, which is usually 5, 6, 7 kittens. We adopt out everyone, all the kittens and the mother. And then we take a break, and we repeat the cycle a few months later, and we must have adopted out like 35, 40 cats in the last 15 years or so. And there's a similar thought with a lot of the wild animals that we have them because Toby comes home and is like, this baby bird was injured, and like, we have to save it. And we always joke that one day she's going to come back with a baby deer, like in the back of her, of her car. So, and in thinking reflecting a little deeper about our relationship to to those animals, like I really love Gandhi's take on a good gauge of a society is how they treat, animals. So we try to lead by example by giving all these animals a good home, whether it's the horses or the dogs or the cats we foster. And the same way that we're hacking into breath work and meditation and visualization and all that, it turns out that there's a very therapeutic aspect to, petting a pet 10 minutes a day releases oxytocin in your system in a way that's just like therapeutic. So Toby has her therapy by spending hours with the horses every week, and I get my fix from loving, these dogs and cats that, to answer your question, Mike, like we interact with them at every moment of the day when they, get on our lap or step on our desk. And you might see one of them today because a little bit like people have learned to let the kids run around in the office and it's not the end of the world during COVID. We welcome the fact that people are a little bit more accepting of your dog or your cat showing up during a business call. So it's an ongoing thing throughout the day. In our being a little bit more intentional to play, I also now try to play a little bit more intentionally with them and get silly and get on all four and have fun with them. One thing you'll learn as you get familiar with some of our pets is they all are they seem very exceptional in the way that they behave, but it's just because of how we approach them, which is an interesting theme for us in terms of how we relate to people and our kids and our animals. So our cats are like dogs. So they come when you call them, they fetch, they follow us around, and people find that perplexing, but it's because we don't think cats are dumb. We know that they're actually a little bit smarter than dogs when it comes to some of or on par with dogs when it comes to problem solving and that type of thing. So we treat them like dogs, and therefore they're very responsive, and people think that cats are independent and they'll ignore you, but our cats are not like that, and our birds are not like that, and our rabbits are not like that. So there's a lot of preconceived notions in what each type of animal does or doesn't do, and it's based on the fact that we don't nurture. Our expectations of them is subpar. Therefore, we have subpar interactions. So you think of that in the context of our own relationship with each other, with our kids, with work partners, and
their environment.
There's a lot to unfold there, and to unpack type of thing. How does nature and animals have an impact in your own lives? I know we want to unpack who NIKO is, but NIKO would also love to learn a little bit more about his own friends.
I've grown up with dogs my whole life. As I said, I have a big 140-pounder sleeping right here, another 40-pounder back there, and my wife is very similar, where she's actually worked at sanctuaries, and so there's a big love for animals in the interaction there, and we've always wanted our children the same to grow up with that love and respect for animals too, right, and nature and the world around us, because that connection piece is so important and can teach them so much.
Absolutely. And how about you, Trev?
Yeah, no, it's interesting that we're having this conversation because, we started the conversation about Gus, the iguana by the pool. And I'm thinking to myself, should I go chase down Gus and try and give him a big hug today? I might have to connect with nature. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it, though. Those little buggers are fast. But it just gets me thinking about the innocence of kids, though, too. Like our kids are in school now. And even down to the granular nature of like the ants in our kitchen. Oh, Daddy, you can't kill that. Pick it up and let's put it outside, right? Or spiders. Like there's big spiders here, and we don't kill those spiders in this house, And that's not to say that if that spider's on my pillow and my wife's freaking out that I'm not going to smack it every once in a while. Like I might, but they do get you thinking differently, right? Because we come into this world with an appreciation for all living things, and then at some points, through conditioning and whatever else, media and just lifestyle and whatnot, it starts to fade away. But as we do all this work and connect with each other, and I love the fact that this conversation has nothing to do with business yet, even though that's how we were originally connected. Because at the end of the day, it's really about our connection and our common interests and our desire to be more in nature and to be on the land and to have no walls around us, right? And it's ironic that we're in them right now, but I think we're all moving in that direction. And it's awesome that we're speaking about this.
Yeah.
Because we could very easily just dive into the big vision of republics, like what you have on your jacket there, right? And spend a whole hour talking about that.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how I'm a very holistic kind of guy. Like I think a lot of in system thinking and critical path. So for me, everything connects, right? And for you too as well. I know it. So for me, what I'm trying to do in my business is not dissociated or disconnected from why we love animals and how we learn from that. And an interesting tidbit on that is that I haven't committed to horsemanship as much as Toby for out of a temporary choice of just time commitment. I'm not a half-fast guy, and when I dive into, especially if I do it as a sport, which is tempting to me because I did a little bit of barrel racing with her, just a very very basic riding and getting a feel for what that feels like, and I think I'd love it. But to honor myself and the sport in it, you sort of have to do it like 3-4 times a week to get any kind of relationship with your horse and to do that well. And I intend to do that a little later in life. So it's like we're building the environment so that we can get there. And in the meantime, I vicariously enjoy that through her, and in doing that, one thing that she does a lot outside of barrel racing and that kind of performance riding, she does a lot of natural horsemanship on the groundwork with the horses. And she does a lot of liberty work where, she'll get in the middle of an arena and she will lunge the horse and she will get the horse to do like a big circle and a small circle and to change sides and all that, but without a lunge. So without, the rope that people usually use to do that. And then you learn, you're like, it's perplexing to see how that happens because horses speak a lot in body position. The angle in which they're a herd animal. So the angle in which they approach each other means something. So you try not to approach a horse dead on, perpendicular, like face on or 90 degrees because they don't love that. Because it's a prey animal, so it's kind of like, oh, you're coming for me. Like, not sure I love that. So when she does that, just the way she positions her body tells the horse where to go, to accelerate, or to turn around. And as an example, if you want a horse to increase speed, you move your eyes from, let's say, their head or their shoulder to their gut essentially, or their hip, and they accelerate. And you try to figure out like, how does that work? And there's various hypotheses, but if you look back into the fact that they're a prey animal, when a wolf or something is looking at their belly, like that triggers the holy F, let's get out of here, right? So there's a whole universe of like how you can be in a relationship with a horse by learning their language, how they communicate with one another, how they're hardwired, and you tap into that. And we've had so many interesting conversations, Toby and I, about how that relates to human relationship and business relationship and learning the language and the currency of someone and then exchanging with them, but getting on their level in terms of their language. And you, I know you both have also experienced it. It's the same as the love languages, right? It's like if you approach someone with something that doesn't translate for them, you don't get the same. The communication is not as effective. So there are things that are fascinating about a horse that in which there are huge lessons for how we deal with one another in terms of expectation. And And there are what we've been exploring is she does clinics sometimes for natural horsemanship to show people how to get the best out of their horses, and we're translating that into business relationship. And we'd love at some point in our retreats to bring, a cohort of business people to teach them the dynamic with a horse, which to them feels like magic. And it's so amazing that once you understand how to communicate with them, what you can get them to do in partnership with you is fascinating. Then you translate it to humans, and it gives them a whole different outlook on, like, guess what? If you approach this person with this preconception, you're creating the outcome that you get that is frustrating, whether you're in sales or you're in partnerships or you're in a relationship with someone on your team. So I've had a lot of introspection as to how I approach people by working with horses and seeing like what she gets out of horses. I'll give you a short example. Like there's a saying in the horse world that says, how does it go again? It's something to the effect that if you have 10 minutes, it's going to take you 3 hours to get the horse to comply, and if you have 3 hours, it's going to take you 10 minutes.
It's kind of like kids.
Yeah. So you're trying
exactly like kids.
So you're trying to, let's say it happened to Toby at some point. She's trying to teach the horse to go in the horse shower. The horse shower, it's like a horse stall, but it's scary because it has like like piping and stuff that they're not used to. And as prey animals, they don't love change. They don't love things that they haven't seen. So you have silliness like some horses are afraid of snow, some are afraid of water, some are afraid of a bag or a tarp, and you try to first of all, it's a 1,200, 1,300, pound beast. You try to manhandle it into the shower. That ain't gonna work. Like if they want, they can kill you. It's like they're a majestic beast, but you have to respect them because it is dangerous to interact. Yeah, with a horse if you don't know what you're doing. So you can't brute force them into it. And if you're stressed and you're rushed and you try to get them to do it, it's scary for them. They feel that and they don't want to do it.
The energy, yeah.
But if you're calm and if you have all the time in the world and you cajole them into it, or you intrigue them into it, or you use curiosity, next thing you know, they're following you around, they're discovering it, they're surrendering to what it is, and then you can get them to do it. So out of all the animals that are really good at human therapy, such as like dolphins or horses are one of them, you'll hear people say horses are really good at reading humans and understanding, like, picking up on feelings and all that. Part of it has to do with their hearing. And a horse can hear your heartbeat within about 6 feet. And I only learned that like this year. Like I had, it kind of rang a bell and I had heard about it before. But so think of an animal that at all time can hear your heartbeat. So there's a reason they're a really good barometer of where you're at. Toby always tells me I love to ride my horses because if I'm not centered,
they tell you.
They tell me right away. So it forces you to go into a place where you're centered. When you're with the horse, you got to be there. You got to be mindful. And you'll see all kinds of things, like somebody's on their horse and then they're paying attention and all of a sudden they text someone. Or they start talking to someone. Next thing you know, the horse is acting up, or he's bucking, or like they don't like if you're not focused. So can you see the layers of therapy in there in terms of like? This
actually just brought me back to kids again. That last piece, because I could tell you I've had this chat with Trev even. I'll tell you if I'm ever trying to multitask and do work in the evening, and I'm jumping on and doing an email. It's always the way that the kids are kicking up, because that energy misalignment, right? They just want our attention, they just want our presence. And I'll tell you, it is night and day when I'm present, and we're actually in there enjoying and chatting and playing. It's a whole difference. But I love that. I've never really heard all those connection pieces with with the similarities between horses and energy. But we do know animals, of course, as a whole, are so much more in tune with the other senses, right? Energy being a huge one.
Yeah.
They don't have all the distractions that we as humans have created.
Yeah, and it's interesting because whether you take in from a very, kind of a higher, a spiritual angle of if you get, or a mystical angle if you get into chi and life energy and all that, like there's a lot of people that look at horses that way, but it's very interesting that even if you believe in none of that, and you take it, and I do believe in some of that, but I'm fascinated that it can actually resonate with people that are very pragmatic and very science driven, because it's once you realize that, well, the horse can hear you. So if you're stressed, if you have a fear, the horse is like, why is this person that I'm now connected with, so that I accept into my herd, this other horse, even though you're not a horse, is now afraid? I don't like that. What's going on? I'm stressed now. I'm anxious. So now imagine that you're sitting on the back of that horse. 150, 200-pound person is a little bit of an afterthought in terms of weight on the back of a horse, because they're like 1,300 pounds, incredibly strong. So they don't mind like a rider, but their skin is so sensitive that they will flick a fly, like they can feel a fly on their back. You're sitting there, and now they feel your position. Are you leaning forward? Are you back? Are you like jittery? So Toby is a great example of someone that rides with, she can get the horse to stop by not saying anything, by not touching the rein, by not using her legs, because she'll just, the way she sits, like the horse knows that, oh, something's about to happen. But she can also show how her being relaxed, like just rolling back her shoulder, breathing, will influence how the horse is reacting. So it turns out that a horse is an incredible mechanism for biofeedback for a human. And as we're fascinated both by that whole interaction, then you look into that with your kids, with your dog, with your friends, and do you think that when we interact, and we know for a fact that communication is something like 60 to 90% nonverbal, depending on the models that you look at. So you think that our brains, our subconscious brains, are not picking up on things like, we can probably pick up if we're sick without consciously knowing it, like somebody would have cancer and you knew something was off, but your conscious brain can't quite pick up what it was. Maybe it was the sheen of the skin. Maybe it was the way they stand, the way they breathe, the way they wince. So for me, the relationship with animals, which are not exactly in the same place in terms of intelligence as humans, they have a different kind of intelligence and different grades, that is so rich that it brings me back to what we are missing in the layers of communication between us. And whether you look at it from a more spiritual angle or a very, very fact-based, hard science kind of angle, like there's a reason that us having this conversation, the three of us in the same room, would feel different than over Zoom, because there's things we lose here, whether it's the, like the smell, the touch, the sound, but that's not through digitize and that type of thing. So for me, it's the way it relates to everything else is that it's just a good reminder for us of how to approach relationships. And then when you apply that to work, like there's so many things I learned from how to have a fertile relationship with our dogs or with our horse or with our birds or with our cats. If you translate that into how you build trust, a lot of it has to do with trust. So if you bring that trust into work or into family relationships and It's fascinating that we're great at getting a dog to trust us, but sometimes we fail miserably at getting a family member to trust us. So for us, even though it's not front and center in our business, for me it's a rich theme. I'm proud that we are animal lovers because it's very connected to our love of people. And both Toby and I are quite, people oriented. Despite me being a little bit of a hermit, but that's another side of being a semi-introvert that comes out a little bit as well.
I love how this conversation is kind of loose, and at the same time, there's all kinds of things that are firing in my head because I have a history of conversations that you and I have had before, NIKO, and Mike might have different things going on. There's a few things that come to mind. One is, how is horse training with parents not mandatory when people have kids? You know what I mean? When you break it down to even the scientific level of look, it's science, right? Or the other side of, can't you just feel this? You can't deny this. And then the other piece is just on a very macro level, and because this is why we're here on these conversations too, is to talk big crazy dreams and go, maybe that's the start of something. I think about education of kids. I think about education of parents and how parents can step into actually being the educators to the kids instead of outsourcing everything to the teachers and the school systems and the government and the news and everything else. That's what we're talking about here, but on a very granular level from personal experience, right? So what does this look like in the future? Because I know we've talked about your desire and aspiration to have a big piece of land and to create these retreat experiences and to not just have one, but to have many and have people collaborating with you. And maybe you want to speak to that for a little bit, because I'd like for you to go into big picture here right now.
And one thing you might not know is that I was at a very young age, my calling was education. So without humble bragging, I happen to be, when it comes to our type of schooling system, I was highly, highly gifted as a kid. So taught myself to read before school, despite...
That's why you're powering through 60 pages a day.
Yeah, exactly. So by age 4.5 or 5, I started with comics, but would bug my mom. I got my mom to teach me the alphabet, and then I would, present her with a jumble of letters and be, is that a word? Is that a word? Is that a word? So I was relentless in her. We didn't really have homeschooling, but she taught me enough of the basics that I could start to form patterns. And then I started to read comics on my own before school. And throughout my high school, I'd read a book a day, in science fiction, and I developed the ability or I honed the ability to read a book but listen to class at the same time, which would infuriate my teachers. And now that I'm digging into Driven by Douglas Brackman, I realize that it's not something that I train myself to do. It's something that if you have the D2, D4 gene, or genetic, either one mutation or differentiator, the Driven have multi-thinking, which is the ability to do these 4 or 5 things in the brain at the same time, which is different than multitasking, but entertain 4 or 5 different thoughts. So I'd take a pleasure in reading a book, having the teacher ask a question and say, Mr. Leger in the back, would you care to answer this? And be like, yeah, of course, blah, 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 blah. Eloquent answer, go back to reading and fight with them and be like, what you're saying is not that I can't read, is you want me to listen. I am listening, but I'm also reading. And so school being fairly easy for me, but at the same time boring. I'm the typical ADHD. The school format's not really great for people that like us. So around 6, 7, 8-year-old, when I felt I had these conversations with myself of what's the point of life and what do I want to do? For me, what do you want to be when you grow up became, what do you want to build? What do you want to make? What do you want to, it didn't stop at I want to be a firefighter or this or that, which wasn't my case. But so I was like, well, and this was like between 7 and 13, so just after the beginning of school to pre-teenager was like, what's the point of all this? And to me, it felt like our systems as a society, like politics, education, money, it all felt broken. And it felt broken from basic concept as a kid where you're like, what's money? How come there's not enough money for everyone? Money is it's just like, it's not a real thing. It's a concept. And now I have better notions, but as a kid, it was just the kind of tiny building blocks of that. And then you realize, well, if let's say there's a big meteorite that's going to strike the Earth, and we say we have to build a spaceship to save ourselves, like some of the famous movies that try to solve that. As Earth tries to defend itself, we wouldn't be limited by money. We'd be limited by resources. Is there enough people? Is there enough mineral? Can we build it? So I couldn't understand why we didn't have a system that was built on that. Why isn't the system built on resources? Why is it built on money? And there's a lot of nuances that I didn't have then. But so it started to feel like these systems were broken because people were resisting change, and there wasn't, the alternatives were getting stifled by the people that the system served, right? So even at a young age, I started to be like, feels like the games are bent here a little bit. And I started to think of like, how can I help with that? How can I change that? How can I make a difference? And at a young age, it came down to education. I was like, well, if we learned something different at a very young age, where we're like a sponge, because I asked myself basic questions like, why don't we learn about this in school? Why don't we learn about that? Why don't we learn about this other thing? And then my initial thought was, communicating between societies is different because we all have different languages. So we need to build a common language. I didn't know about Esperanto back then, so I just thought like, and started to think that maybe the goal was to build a common language. And as I explored that further, I came down to like, the language doesn't matter. It's the education. It's what we learn. And I started to dream of, amazing higher education institution that would be on a remote exotic island, and it would all feel like a retreat, but you'd have things like archery and horsemanship and learn Zen and spirituality and breathing. And so I had images like that in my head from like 6 to 13, like constantly. So education was a calling. And eventually I decided that I would go in business first, because business was the means to be able to change education. It was like, well, if I build enough wealth to start some of these initiatives, it felt like the track that I was compelled to. You don't have to do it like that, but for me that made sense. I'm like, let's go in business, make a bunch of money, create an abundance of wealth, use the wealth to influence education. So all the things that you're bringing up and you're passionate about, Trev, and I know Mike resonate with you, like this kind of like, let's evolve education. It speaks back to my original roots of why I'm doing all this. And in the last few years of us building Republics, after spending 7 years in corporate from 2008 to 2016, and seeing how this digital transformation that was promised to us, like the how digital marketing was going to make everything easier because it would connect people with the advent of the internet and all that, and everything would be measurable, but the execution of that was really painstakingly complex, especially for the smaller business. The bigger business, they could have a slew of people solving it for them, and they could kind of get some level of success on their digital transformation. But the little guys were suffering from just trying to keep up with the complexity that's exploding over the years. So in thinking, so that was a compelling problem, like digital is really tough for the small businesses. So I started to entertain the idea of saying, how do we make it simpler for them? How do we empower them to take advantage? Because they are compelling, success stories of people that built amazing fortunes through software and the internet and platforms and all that. So I wanted to make that more accessible to the 99% that, in my view, keeps getting exploited by the 1%. So back to that theme of inequity and how that's not working out. And then I thought a lot more about how much do small businesses matter, because a lot of these people have jobs or small businesses. I didn't feel like I could make an impact so much on jobs. Like, that felt like a different angle. So I was like, what if we empower people to just be better at growing their business, at lowering the failure rate of like 80%, over the course of the first 10 years, like 80% of businesses will fail. And then I started to look at, what do business do? Well, businesses employ 5, 10, 15, 20 people on a local basis, often, not always. But so the livelihood that is created from a business translates to the communities and into physical communities, and or even in some cases when it's more distributed and online, it still translates to that online community, that community of practice and those people. So it felt like if we make it easier for people to harness abundance through their own business, now we're changing stuff. Now we can, like, why do small businesses matter? Because if you look it up, you realize that they are responsible for the majority of innovation, for the majority of employment, for even a majority, like for most of the GDP. And it's like, in some places it's a little bit under 50%. In some places it's over 50%. It depends if you consider like government spending or not. Like you can get technical with the stats, but I've seen it hover for anywhere from 40-something to 50-something in the case that we look at. So you're like, wow, small businesses in a lot of cases are the backbone of the economy, and they matter to people's livelihood and abundance. So if we make it easier for them to grow abundance in their life through that matters. And lo and behold, in 2017, I met Thomas, who felt similarly about, actually his deeper calling was in education as well. He really believed in micro content, and when he went to Brazil and was in the favelas and saw like people being poor, like the contrast for him of poor people but having a mobile phone, which has a high level of penetration there, he could see that people lived in a dilapidated environment where there wasn't a lot of means, but they had access to content and the internet. It was like, wow, that's really interesting. And he took a lot of interest in micro lending and like empowering people with just a few dollars, but teaching them stuff. And so we started to think about, can we help people have upward social mobility through content, micro lending? So that was sort of his calling. And in his business, where like me was trying to get to be able to do that, he happened to have a marketing agency, and he had already started to think, my wrangling of my tech stack for this agency, choosing all the right tools and what helps grow a business, he started to realize that he could productize that and sell the learning of how to, essentially syndicate his tech stack that works to other people. So Trevor, we've had similar conversation. Once you figure out the mic setup, the lighting, like all the tricks that to produce online content, if you tell other people, I can share my knowledge with you for free or for a price, that has a value, and it helps people on their own journey. So it was a similar thinking around which tools do you use to track reporting, and which tool do you use to manage your digital assets, and for this and for that. So when we met through a mutual friend who said, you two are different kind of crazy, you should really get together. When I shared this vision for growth as a service that I had, where my thinking was originally, to grow your business, you need a series of people, process, and technology. It's that infamous triangle of like, you need the right process, the right framework, the right critical path to get from your A to your B. you will need people to do that. And if you're going digital, there's a series of tools that you need to execute that. So it was like, how can we get businesses to go to a place where they don't have to wrangle digital transformation? They can just state the outcomes they need. I'm running a retreat. I'm Trevor and Mike, and this year we'll have 5 retreats, and we need 150 people to fill them. And we usually get easily 50, and the other 100 is challenging. It's not the case. You guys are marketers yourself, but just as an example, you're in that space where you're like, I want 100 more, or you're like, we easily have 500, we need 10,000. There's a point where you need help to grow, and you have this aspect of being better together. So instead of selling you a tactic or a process, or I wanted us to be in the business of selling the outcome. What you're looking for is 10,000 new members to your community or to attend your retreats. And I wanted a place where you can buy that. It's the infamous 50% of marketing doesn't work, and I don't know which 50. How about we build the intelligence? How about if we all measure how we market stuff and put that in the same place and build a record of truth of what really works in what context, all of a sudden, when you buy a certain tactic for a certain thing, you benefit from the other guy who was also trying to fill a different color retreat and tried something, and it was tested and true. So it was a signal versus noise. Let's eliminate the noise of things that don't work, or the charlatans or the fools. There's always people selling snake oil. So I wanted to kind of push those away. There's fools. It's Nicholas Nassim Taleb. I'm butchering his name, but who said, in the market, like, there's these charlatans and fools. So the charlatans are trying to take you for a ride. The fools think they know better. I will build you a website. It'll be amazing, but they haven't really kept up to date. They don't realize what's possible, and they're building you something that's not that great, but they think it's great. So if we measure what works, all of a sudden we can have a meritocracy of sending the work to what really works, to triage, like, you need this outcome. What's going to give you that outcome? You don't see it on camera, but one of the pets just passed across the desk. So this was the beginning around 2012 of this growth as a service idea of having a platform where everything is available, all the people, all the technologies, all the processes, but we reverse engineer what has worked for others to create the kind of outcome that you're looking for. And the second layer of that was like, instead of paying people for their effort, let's pay them based on results. So if somebody builds you a funnel or a website or a sequence that you need to fill your retreats, let's give them what I like to call rent and grocery money for doing it. So let's say it's a $5,000 website or the equivalent. Let's give them like something like $1,000 for having built it. It's like, oh, you built it, great, thank you so much. And you get a little bit of recognition for putting in the work. But you'll only get the added value of your work if it also produces results. So all of a sudden, every time you get somebody to buy a retreat package, they get a kickback. So now incentive is behavior. Now everyone involved in your marketing, the copywriter, the designer, the videograph, this, that, like the 20 functions. I like to say that it takes a village to raise a business. It takes a village to raise a kid. It takes a village to raise a business. So all of a sudden, people are getting the work because they've had results before, and for your work, they're getting a little bit of money for building it, but they're getting a lot of money if it works forever, evergreen, for life. So that's what we're trying to build with Republics, and it so happens that to build it, we decided not to go for venture cap money and for that kind of capital. We said instead, let's buy businesses that have cash flow. Let's use the cash flow to invest in our tech, to build that tech. But the businesses that we're buying, they are marketing agencies, and we're helping them grow, and we're using them as design partners for our tech. So this is the thing that we're doing, and in doing all that, and how it connects back to to your question that I haven't forgotten about, like the big picture of retreats and all that, it's like you can only be as successful in any kind of endeavor like that. The limit of how successful you get is how much you engage your people. And I'm a huge believer that you have to put people first, because the only way that people will care about your business is if you care about them first. And you can't fake it. It's like a horse. If I pretend to care for you, Trevor, and you're in my business, you will smell it 100 miles away. I have to really care. But if I do really care, if I'm your partner or I'm your peer or I'm your manager, and you feel like my priority is for you to self-actualize, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, my manager is a servant leader, has my best interest at heart for real. And some of my people have seen that, because when they were at a place in their career where they had an opportunity elsewhere and it served them better, I helped them to get it. I'm not selfish and stay in my business. Like, no, this is great for you. Go, I'll help you. And they often we cross roads later, because there's a trust there, there's a respect, and you know, life has a weird way of bringing those paths together. So there's people that feel like they've been working with me for 12 years, but only 5 or 6 out of those were in my different businesses that I've had, but they still consider the 2 years that I helped them find a job elsewhere and send them there to learn something, and then they come back. It all feels like the same plan, program, circle, network. So if we do that for our people, we have to provide all the other dimensions. We have to be a vector of providing all the other dimension that our people need to perform. So I love the idea of saying, you're on my team, and now you have your dream house, because we have a program where we help you acquire your dream property, and then we integrate that into how we do business, because other people can benefit from your farm, your animal sanctuary, whatever it is. So for me, the people dimension of a business is just as interesting, if not more, than the rest of the tactical aspect of the business. So I've had a fascination for how do we get people to truly live their best life through our organization or through some of the stuff we do. So it makes for a longer conversation, but I have a vision of how to have this massive platform for people to acquire their dream property, and to have revenue streams of like short-term rental, biofood, retreat, education, spirituality, where that's how they get the property that they want, is by giving value that people, like compensate them from. And it's a true vision of abundance. Like, they get more, the people get more. This is how, like, everybody that bands together to do that, it's truly the tide that raises all the boat, because it's the vision of abundance versus vision of scarcity. There's no shortage of revenue streams and of abundance and resources, but we have to be just a little more intentional about how we tap into it and how we create abundance together. So for me, it's a little bit of a side project. It's not officially part of the business. But I consider it to be sort of a sandbox where I'm testing this ability to give people what they dream of, and then I do want to incorporate it in the business, because what a great way to attract the best talent and retain them, by just providing their best life, and having them stay, because every morning they think that you're the best work environment for them, the same way that we live our relationship with Toby by choosing each other every day. Like, we don't believe in, like, I'm grateful when she comes at home late at night. I'm not angry. I'm grateful she came back. and we try to approach it like that. I love Zappos always offered their employees $3,000 cash to leave at any time. I want to have that kind of relationship with our people, but at the same time, to serve the mission, I will try my darnest for them to have a gazillion reason to stay, because it provides their best life. So there's a lot to unpack there, but that's sort of how some of these pieces connect. And once you have a place where you can have retreat and corporate retreats and growth, self-development retreat, based on the conversation we've had today, you can only imagine all the layers that my ADHD brain thinks when it comes to how we can stack all that into a network of education, essentially. The land and the real estate property is just the means to get to human experience, enjoyment of each other, cooperation, collaboration, and education. So that's sort of the critical path for us to get there.
I think of
and that's verbal diarrhea for you.
It's good though. You get to talking
incredible.
through it, and I just think about the evolution of these conversations. That was one of the things we ended the last chat with Will on too. Is imagine what this is going to be like in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 and 12 when we meet in person and we actually share that energy in that space. And you've got an evening to sit down and really dig deep into these things and find commonalities and where you can, fit puzzle pieces together. But there's a quote. I'm just going to say it because I can't not have it in front of me, but it's, we can go fast alone and we can go far together. That's what I think of here is that mind that just came out right there. I can do those exact same kind of, verbal diarrhea, like you say, tangents, like this is the vision. And so can Mike. We both had them. But until you do that, nobody else around you knows what you're thinking or what is even possible. And we literally just talked about this the other day, Mike, where we were saying, you say something out loud and somebody picks up on it and goes, I've thought about that before too. I thought I was the only one. I was a little crazy.
And it keeps
all
expanding.
Of a sudden there were two. Yeah. That's how the wolf packs get created,
That's right.
Yeah. And it's when you take any of our vision and look at what is required to make it happen, and then look at the profile of the people you need to make it happen, and as they emerge, think of how you can serve them. Like we've forgone bartering in our society to a large extent, and one of the reasons for that is because bartering between us doesn't serve the 1%. So it's stifled, and to the point where it's even there's some of it is illegal, some of it is taxable, some of it. So how crazy is that we live in a society where if I help you and you help me, we better pay tax on that. So that gives us pause in terms of choosing where we live and what we accept. One of the reasons we want to move from here is, I won't name the municipality, but it's illegal to have more than 2 pets where we live, and fish count and birds count. So we probably have 100 pets by that count. You know what I mean? We probably have just 60 fish. So we want to go to a place where that's not the case, and when you can have backyard chicken and that type of thing. But moreover, as we build this network of retreats and real estate and all that, I'm the kind of guy where I want us to choose municipalities and boroughs where, by having a critical mass of us, we can also start to infiltrate the municipal council and change the bylaws. And it's we can change the system from within and create pockets of places, whether they're in Costa Rica or in Canada or in the States, create places where the values we believe in and how we believe we can be better together is feasible and is not stifled. So this thinking of, when I think about nutrition and all that, all of a sudden I think of Taylor, which I didn't know before. But because we're being better together, now we have somebody who's a chef. We have somebody who has a passion. We have somebody who's looking for opportunities. And I'm recently I'm into blue zone nutrition. These places in the world where people live 100 years, super agers, and there's a reason for it. Part of it is nutrition. How do we incorporate that into our lives? But how do we make it so that getting the ingredients is easy? And so all of a sudden, if you have a network of we were building it like a trail a little bit, the Pinkstone Trail, which I'll share more about one day, but it's if we have a trail of those on the East Coast, on the West Coast, and crossing the country in Canada and in the States, that becomes a distribution network. Like now we can source food through like the different farms and people's microgreens and all that. And well, my passion is not to build meal plans, but somebody in the group is. And somebody in the group's passion might be to teach chefs. And now we have a whole just the thinking of like education of chefs and cooks, but align with that and farm to table, but also, you know, tapping into the blue zone, like any single aspect of how you run a retreat, a corporate retreat, a farm, a ranch. We can think of someone in the group can add to that, can enrich that. It's their passion to do so. Imagine how far we can go all together as we build this community. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah,
consider my mind blown.
I love that, and that's been a big vision for Trev and I behind pieces of this, and why Taylor. You know, Taylor was at our first retreat, and he wasn't the chef there, but we knew he had the gift, and so when we learned that he was a Red Seal chef and we saw his true passion after that, we said, you have to bring this to us, because he wants to do the work. He's got the love, you know, there for it, and he wants to bring the gifts. And so now he's just combining two beautiful worlds, you know, together. So that's absolutely how it's going to unfold as we go too. It's what are the other gifts that we can bring amongst the men, right? And we have some people also that are coming to this one that are working on stuff as we speak. You know, we have Justin
I checked your website yesterday, and it's really enticing, the quality of some of the people that are there. And it's like, for me, you Trevor, you know this, and Mike, you know this a little bit. I get fascinated by things that start in the mind and then exist in the physical world. And I get a kick out of thinking that this moment that we're sharing started as some neurons firing in your brains as you're connecting at humans, and I get a deep excitement, like there's some sparks in my brain just thinking about, if we're intentional and as we are deliberately feeding this by giving it focus and attention and care and love, how many people we can elevate with this, and where we can go together. Yes. And you become a little bit of a nation within the nation, because now, you know, we have ways of rewarding each other and helping each other and bartering and supporting each other. And so, you know, now it's a few dozen people, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. And I can't wait to see the possibilities that we unfold as a tribe and as a wolf pack. And it's been a pretty exciting journey, and I want to take a minute to thank you both for including me and for honoring me, and it's there is a friendship that runs deeper than everything else in the, you know, there's a human connection that's deeper than the business connection, and then all the other layers of roles that we have in that, and I'm quite grateful for that. And I find myself smirking or smiling, you know, like alone in my office, just thinking about this journey that we're on. So it's a pretty exciting thing.
Well, likewise, brother. I again, as Trev said, I've only known you for a couple months, and I already have such a deep love and respect for you, and the way you think and the ideas that you bring, and the depth to the conversations that we've had. And as you say, you know, we're just getting started here, and never mind the collective that we're creating, but the ripple effect that it will have into our families, into our animals, into our kids, and beyond, right? So
I always say, if I love you more than I know you, that's a pretty darn good sign, and I can say that of both of you. And Trevor, now I'm starting to have more peels of the onion unfolding, but we also don't know each other all that well, you know, like we're starting on that journey, but I have a much deeper love for both of you than a knowledge of you. So I can't wait to get deeper into knowledge and get deeper into love. So it's a pretty precious gift.
Yes, brother. Well, thank you so much for taking us into your world today and sharing a bit more of your story. I know we could keep chatting forever, the three of us.
And I get a kick out of the fact that it's probably not the conversation you had in mind, and that's a little bit. And I know you surrender to it, but I hope that it surprised you a little bit, because I get a kick out of that. That's a little bit of my brand of like, let's talk about something that feels completely tangential but connects to it all.
Perfectly imperfect, brother.
Exactly.
Doesn't surprise me at all. It's one of the things I appreciate about you. 'Cause when I share, like, for example, a clip that's talking about, these golden thread conversations, and you consume it and go, oh yeah, I know that concept. That probably is going through your brain when you sit down here with us today and realize that we can get 45 minutes in and then reel it back into the core of what the hell we're even doing here right now, And that's pretty cool. That's something that I desire in relationships. I want depth.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, it's experiences, and it's the ability to go down a path and go, I'm not exactly sure where we're going with this, but I'm going to stay on the trail with you. Let's just keep going a little further, and the journey continues. So.
Absolutely. Thank you both, and can't wait to see you.
Yes.
All right.
Man.
Thanks, NIKO.
Thanks. Have a good one.